Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on harnessing data and multi-agency partnerships to tackle serious violence. I'm David Fairhurst, I'm Executive Director and Chair at Mutual Ventures, and I'll be introducing and chairing this morning's session, which is a joint endeavour with colleagues from Zantura and Kenton Medway's Violence Reduction Unit. For those of you who haven't come across Mutual Ventures, we were established in 2011 and we are specialist advisors in public service improvement and change. Over the last decade, we've supported numerous national programmes across both central and devolved government, and our work is focused on new and innovative ways of delivering public services with an emphasis on improving quality and reducing costs. And increasingly, that means improving the way in which public sector agencies and communities work together to strengthen preventative services and coordinate their interventions. Our co-host Zantura, a data analytics specialist, who've been leading the way in safely and securely sharing and using data across public sector partners for over a decade. And they'll say a little bit more about themselves in a moment or two when we get into the meat of the presentations. Today's discussions will explore how multi-agency working and data sharing can support efforts to tackle serious violence. We'll draw on both the specific work of violence reduction units and the lived experience of those from local government. Now, I'll just take a moment to offer some further background and context to violence reduction units for those who aren't familiar with them. VRUs are generally a specific unit hosted within a police force area focused on targeted interventions to tackle perpetrators and support victims of serious violence. Generally regarded as being successful in Scotland, the concept was further encouraged in England between 2019 and 2022, when 20 police force areas received funding from Home Office, either to establish or build upon existing violence reduction units as part of the Serious Violence Fund. The aim of VRUs is to lead and coordinate a preventative whole system approach to violence reduction, which comprises multi-agency working, data sharing and analysis, engaging young people and communities, and commissioning evidence-based interventions. We'll be focusing on the first two of those areas today. We have two presentations for you this morning. The first from colleagues at Zantura and the Kenton Medway Violence Reduction Unit, which will look at ways to work to improve the quality of data used to inform interventions. And the second from Professor Donna Hall, a non-executive director here at Mutual Ventures. And Donna will focus on multi-agency working. She'll offer some of her thoughts from a successful career in local government, including her work as chief executive in Wigan, implementing the Wigan deal. Our aim today really is to share some of the knowledge and experience that we have in these areas and to stimulate thought and invite discussion. You're all very welcome to post questions at any time using our Q&A function, and we'll address as many questions as we can following each of the presentations. So please don't be shy, pop questions in as we go, and as I say, we'll be answering questions throughout. We'll finish this promptly, if not before 11:30, but absolutely at 11:30 on the dot. And we'll progress straight away with our first presentation. And I'd like to welcome colleagues from Zantura. And first of all, Mark Powell from Kenton Medway's Violence Reduction Unit. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, David. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Powell. I'm one of the directors for the Kenton Medway Violence Reduction Unit. And I'm here today because we are collaborating with Zantura in how we use data to better understand the landscape. So violence reduction units are predicated on a sort of public health approach, whereby we should be combining data sets to understand what are the problems that our communities face. And, you know, Kent as a county is big. It's a two-tier authority and it's got a unitary as well. So there are some real complexities just in terms of the landscape that we have. But we need to be able to combine, you know, the data that is available to understand those different communities and neighborhoods most affected by serious violence, and what are the kind of the causes. How can we sort of tackle some of those causes to prevent it happening in the first place? we also need to use that data to understand what works, and then build on what works. And serious violence is a complex issue. There are a number of risk factors, and OHIDs have done some really excellent work in identifying those risk factors. You have risk factors around the individual. For example, that might be their emotional or mental health. They may have special education needs. There are risk factors linked to sort of families and relationships. So whether, for example, there's domestic abuse taking place in the family in which they live, or the sort of the peers that individual has, and whether those peers are potentially linked to crime in some way, shape, or form. And then you have the community, which may include, for children, the school that they attend. It may be the neighbourhood in which they live, and is that a deprived neighbourhood? For example, these are all known risk factors. And I think some of the complexity is that there's lots of data available, but it's held separately. And there are often individual or single strategies trying to tackle those particular issues. And one of the challenges that we face is, how do we cut across all of that? How do we try and make sure that we kind of combine sort of some of that, so that there is a shared understanding, or you don't have separate strategies pulling in different directions? And I think, as well as the combining of the data, we have to acknowledge that even within organizations, data is not always well understood and well shared across different teams. And that can be a challenge. But at the moment, in Kent and Medway, we currently receive data from sort of police, from the local authorities, sort of children's services. That might be youth justice, that might be education. We get it from probation. We receive it from parts of the health service. We receive information from British Transport Police. So we are well serviced in terms of the information we get. What we've been able to do with Zantura is to look at how we then combine and analyze that data. How do we understand that data in a shared single format that allows people to then start to think about and analyze and understand the picture that they face? There are real challenges with that, as well as being able to combine it, and data can look very different from different organizations. There are organizations that are nervous about sharing that data, and for good reason. Some of that data is very sensitive, and we have to try and manage that alongside it. But we see real benefits. We know at the moment that sharing data manually is time consuming. There is a real skills gap in terms of the analysts available, and sort of those teams that we need, and they have multiple demands on their time, because of all those sort of different shared, different single strategies, where that people are looking for data. So our aim has been to try and work with an organization to try and pull that data to build something that at the moment is based on serious violence, and using the serious violence duty, because organizations now have that legal responsibility to be doing this work, but potentially to demonstrate the value in doing this that could be wider than serious violence. So we're really pleased to be working with Zantura. I'm now going to hand over to Tom Davis from Zantura, who I think is going to talk a bit more about the organisation and about the work they're doing.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yeah, and hi everyone. It's great to be here. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background about Zantura in terms of who we are, and the work that we do, and also just provide a bit of an overview of some of the other areas that we're also working on, alongside the work with the violence reduction units. So we were founded over 10 years ago with the ambition of improving outcomes for vulnerable people through the more effective use of data, and really how to use that data to drive better partnership working and more holistic working with individuals. And it's been a challenging journey. There are, I'm sure everyone will be aware, a number of challenges in multi-agency data sharing, not least information governance, ethics, data quality, how to match data without unique identifiers, and then also how to operationally use that data to ensure you're helping individuals who are at risk. But we are currently working across a range of different agendas. We're working with the violence reduction units, as Mark's just outlined, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that over the next 20 minutes. We're also working with local authorities looking at homelessness prevention, so identifying individuals at risk of homelessness up to 6 months in advance, and delivering early intervention to support them and prevent them from becoming homeless. We're working in a range of agendas in adult social care and the health system, looking at things like falls prevention, looking at carer breakdown, looking at identification of individuals who are on the edge of care, and how to provide early support to them to prevent them escalating needs. We're working in children's services on the Supporting Families programme, and also looking at individuals at risk of stepping up to higher tiers of support. And we're also working in the financial exclusion space, so identifying individuals with multiple debts or escalating debts, and also wider vulnerabilities that might make them so that councils or other voluntary sectors can support them and prevent that from escalating. And across all of those agendas, we're using the OneView infrastructure, which is what we've used for the violence reduction unit work. And that is really a multi-agency data sharing platform with inbuilt information governance, which enables us to effectively ingest and match and control the sharing of data across lots and lots of different data sets within the public sector. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Hannah, who's going to talk specifically about the work that we've been delivering with the Kent and Medway Violence Reduction Unit.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, I've just got a couple of slides, and then I'm going to talk you through some dashboards. So we take in data from many partners, and we use both structured drop-down fields and unstructured case node fields of data. We use a process of text analytics to identify the risks within this data. All the data is split out between personal identifiers and the rest of the data, and is then pseudonymized prior to transferring to Xantura. After processing and with the right information governance permissions, users can view the data, and where necessary, it can be then de-pseudonymized, so viewed at an identifiable level. We use the information governance process to fully document all of the data at field level and who can see what and in which circumstances, and this is then built into the system as controls. Thanks, David. Next slide. So we've got a really strong set of partners working on this project, and they're at various stages of getting the data into the system. The aim is to really reduce that manual effort and automate the regular flow of data, and we've successfully achieved this for several partners so far. In the dashboards, you will see we've got police data, children's social care data, youth justice data, and education data. We'll be shortly adding another unitary authority, and from the district councils, housing, financial exclusion, debt data, and community safety data. Following that, we'll be adding in probation data and the fire and rescue service data. Thanks, Rebecca. I will take you to see where we're at with the dashboards. Now, I could talk to you about these dashboards for a very long time, but I'm going to do a really quick whistle-top tour of them. So firstly, we've got 3 maps. So they're showing at LSOA level, ward level, and district level. The blue-green layer that you can see across the map is children's social care and youth justice data overlays. And then the filters for that allow you to control these layers and see the level of interventions across districts or county. The red clusters are the police offence data. The cluster filters allow you to drill down by age, crime type, suspect or victim, various flags from the police data, and MO intelligence from the police data. There's a pop-up for when you hover over police data, and this shows Cambridge Crime Harm Index score for each of the crime references and overlays it with children's social care data. The pop-up for interventions, so the blue heat map shows engagement with children's social care and the youth justice outcomes. We've also added many points of interest into the map, so you can see licensed premises, parks, train stations, schools, etc. These are all searchable by area, by the type of point of interest, or by the specific name of that place. We also have a suite of Power BI dashboards. All of these dashboards are interactive. So if you click onto any part of them, they will filter down the rest of the charts on that screen. There are actually 7 dashboard tabs, but I won't go through each of them on here. Each one of those has 11 filters. So the key filters for all of these dashboards are whether it's victims or suspects, the district that the things are happening in, whether it's serious violence as defined by the VRU, or whether it's all crime types, some stuff around time, so the dates or time of day that offences have happened, and other demographics such as age and ethnicity. So this first set of charts that you're looking at shows offence types and subtypes from the structured police data. You can interrogate this down to district level and use all of the filters that I just mentioned to be really specific about what you want to see. The second chart I'm going to show is around pathway analysis. So this is around all of the different pathways of things that are happening for people. All of these dashboards interact. So if you filter one element, they filter through to the rest of the charts. So we're looking there at assault with injury. The next chart to the right of that shows the risk factors from structured data and from case notes. So things like physical aggression, socially unacceptable behaviour, etc. Underneath that, we've got an MO chart from the police data, which is showing the different MOs and the intelligence that's fed through into the system for specific offences. So, for example, means employed. And then on the right, we've got a pathways through intervention chart. So this is showing children's social care and youth justice at the moment. So for those people that we've just filtered down through with assault with injury, there were 5 young people who at that point stepping up and down continually between early help and child in need whilst that offending was going on. So you can see that overlay of what's going on for people while the offending's happening. The next chart we're going to show is a multi-agency highlight report. I'm just going to pop that out so you can see it better. And this shows the crossover between services such as children's social care, education, youth justice, and the police. It's fully configurable, so as we get more data in, we'll be expanding that out. So we'll be showing things like community safety partnership and probation overlays on this as well. I'm going to now talk you through the case summaries. So the case summary is accessible through browser-based case management tools such as Mosaic, Liquid Logic, or Athena when on the individual record page. It could be used, for example, by workers taking a specific case to panel or deciding on prevention activity. It shows a single view of a household and all of the activities and risk that's gone on for them. It's fully configurable to show whatever is required, and it's locked down by role-based access. And all the decisions about what should be put into these case summaries are decided as part of the implementation of projects. On the left are details around household composition and addresses and address history, as well as systems references, which is really useful when speaking to other agencies. In the main body is a configurable section. So in this demo, it's got information on debt and financial exclusion. It's got interventions and a risk summary. The interventions section shows open interventions from across the partnership and also a section on closed historic interactions. The risk summary is generated using a large language model to make key data points accessible and understandable quickly to the user. There's also a chronology which joins together the episodes, relevant interactions, and key data points in a time series. I'm going to hand back over to David now. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So we've got time now for questions. Please do post any additional questions you have in the Q&A. So I've got a few questions here, particularly around, I think, sort of cost and time of implementing the OneView platform and this dashboard. So how quickly can it be implemented, and what is the cost?
Yeah, I can pick that up. So in terms of the implementation time, obviously there's dependencies on the information governance side, and the generation of the necessary DPIAs and everything else, and also the conversations with the data owners, and those tend to be the areas that can add time into the delivery. Kind of separating those out, then we can have the platform operational in about 3 to 6 months, obviously, dependent on how long that IG and data extraction takes, I would say. In terms of the cost, the license model for the platform is based on the amount of data we're processing, and the number of users. So it's designed to scale up as we add more value cases, or more different or more data into the system. And the overall cost will be dependent on the kind of size of the authority generally.
Thank you, Tom. Mark, got one through here in terms of your experience using the dashboard to direct activity and so on. Interested in hearing a bit more from you on that.
Yeah, certainly. And I think just to follow on from Tom, in terms of how quickly something can be done, I think the challenge is the relationships, and people's confidence and willingness to be part of that. So I think the technical side can be built quite quickly, but I think there's a lot of groundwork that needs to get people on board. And if there's that willingness and support, then things will move a lot quicker. I think in terms of using the dashboard, what we have at the moment is something that is relatively limited, because we are waiting for some of the critical software to be installed on systems, and there's some IT security checks to still go through. But people, I think, are very interested in what we have at the moment, which allows us to understand and look at kind of locations and do that location-based analysis. And that can include different times of day, that can include different points of interest, such as is it happening in sort of transport hubs, or close to sort of nightclubs, fast food locations, etc. But I think there has been a huge amount of interest in whether we can then develop that more kind of sort of the person level analysis. I think people can see some significant benefits from that, that add a huge amount of value, and would really allow things to be speeded up. That's the work that is currently being developed at the moment. And while we know that technically it can be done, there is the ethics and the information governance side that we're still sort of working through. So I think what we have is it's got people's interest, and they're in, and they can see the value and benefit from what we've got at the moment, but can really see significant additional benefit, from whether we, when we can actually develop phase 2 with that kind of person level data sharing.
Thanks, Mark. Just building on that as well, we've got another question in related to it, really. Can you describe a specific example of the difference that it's made so far?
I'm not sure that I can at the moment, being absolutely frank, because I think phase 1 was to build and sort of test the concept of, can we do this, and what it's doing is kind of complementing and replicating what is being done manually. So, we have VRU analysts doing location-based assessments. We have sort of police colleagues in, where they have grip hotspots of serious violence. They're also doing that. What this is allowing us to do, I think, is to demonstrate we can replicate that, but we can do it quicker. Because potentially you can do it almost live once you've got that data feed going in. So I think we've been able to show that we can do it, and we can show the value it brings, and potentially that allows for sort of cost savings, because you may not need so many analysts having to do that manual analysis, and you can move it to something that is automated.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Going back to data governance, and this might be one for you, Hannah, but I'll let you decide. How are you ensuring the ethical use of data?
Yeah, so we've got a whole work stream going on at the moment around ethics and using a lot of the toolkits from central government and also the ICO's ethics and AI work. We've had some consultation with the EHRC around some of that kind of ethical use and making sure that we are using data appropriately, and that the equalities element of it is strong, and it's lots of ongoing conversations. We've engaged with all of the data controllers for each of these different bits of data. The data gets looked at field level, and even within those fields there are specific parameters set around what we should and shouldn't use and how they should be used in what purpose, and what the legal basis is obviously for it. But yeah, there is a very strong element of just because you can do something, does it mean that you should do something, and what are all of the right, what are the actual benefits, and very much considering the privacy of the data subjects as well. So yeah, it's ongoing work, and it isn't going to stop. It's not something that you do once. It's something that you do continually, and we have that set up to from all of the partners feeding in.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Another question here in terms of I suppose the VRU and whether that can develop and build on the data yourself, or are you reliant on Xantura for that?
I think to do it well, we need to be in partnership with experts who can do that sort of, build that sort of technologically driven data sharing. We were set up in November 2019, and we have a team of analysts. So they will do that manual analysis, and they can continue to do that. And we are well supported in terms of the data that we receive. I think it's one of the strengths of our partnership in Kent, and I know different VRUs get different data sets depending, I think, partly on people's capacity, but also kind of the relationship and confidence people have. Potentially, we can continue to do that and to do it manually, but it's a huge cost in doing that. It's time consuming, and we are reliant on all our partners to also have that capacity to do that. And we've seen fluctuations where a team within Kent County Council, for example, is only saying we've got 3 people off sick and 2 on leave. We can't give you this data at the moment. And that's the risk that we face. And we're always reliant on others' capacity to share that data manually. I think what we're trying to do here is to kind of remove that kind of risk factor in terms of capacity. And actually that would allow their analysts to be doing other pieces of work. It would allow our analysts to be doing other pieces of work, because we can see that there's that potential there to kind of remove some of that reliance on individuals, and to be allowing them to think in more deeper terms, to do more sort of deeper analysis of particular themes and trends.
Thanks, Mark. Tom, did you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe if I just pick up from a technical perspective as well. So, I mean, in terms of the way that the platform works, there's a developer environment within it. So where our councils or other clients have the capabilities in-house, the data science capabilities in-house, they can build their own assets on top of the data. So they can build their own models, their own stratifications, their own dashboards. They can evolve the ones that we have. And I guess from a collaborative perspective, we can share what's been developed in other clients with all of the other people who are using the platform. So it's very open in that regard, where there's capacity, as Mark points to, where there's capacity and capability within that organization.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll conclude that part of our presentation there. Thank you so much to our contributors. We're going to move on now to focus a little bit more on the partnership side of things. So, and I'd like to introduce Donna Hall. Hello, Donna. You're very welcome. Good to have you here. So many of you will know Donna from her previous life as a chief executive in local government, working with Wigan and the work that you did on Wigan Deal. But your reach extends far beyond that these days, I think, in terms of your input and work both with policy developers and also those still on the front line delivering public services and working together to integrate work across multi-agency partners. So really interested to hear your thoughts and views this morning. I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, David. Really enjoyed the presentation there, and you know, a fantastic use of data, really robust and really scientific. My presentation is really around the application of that data and what difference it can make in real life communities by using it, deploying it, not just as a one-off, but all the time, using it, just making it the way you work every day, using that data and intelligence in your systems. So going back in time, in Wigan, we had to make around 160, 170 million pounds worth of savings. We had huge pressures of demand. Wigan is one of the largest metropolitan boroughs in the UK, and multiple areas of deprivation. We were the third worst cut local authority in the UK back in 2011-12, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, proportionately. So we knew we had to kind of reimagine, reinvent our role. So we moved away from being just a paternalistic provider of services to creating a partnership with partners in the place. So police were really key partners, Department of Work and Pensions, housing associations, community and voluntary sector, fire and rescue, everyone basically who works at criminal justice, everyone who works or served the people in the place, schools, primary care, the NHS, acute, mental health, everyone. And we created that partnership through something called the Wigan Deal, which was around how we will work together. It was about culture, attitudes and behaviours of all of our frontline teams and liberating them to work differently in communities, in neighbourhoods, to do the right thing, to use the data and intelligence that we were all looking at separately, all having our own initiatives and all interacting with the same people multiple times a day to deliver our own specific initiative, whether it was the council, the police, whoever. So one of the first things that we did was set up a shared data and insight team, bringing together people across those agencies to share data and intelligence. Many people told us we couldn't do it. It was illegal. We'd be shut down, but we did it. So people were able to share insight into the various systems that Zantura have just talked about today, all sat in the same room, all working together. And that's one of the things that I do worry with the cuts to particularly local government, that that capacity has gone a little bit or has been watered down a bit. So really making sure you've got those people who do have at their fingertips all of your information from council tax, from adult social care, from criminal justice, everything coming together. And then the most important thing for us is that we used it and we deployed that intelligence. And rather than it just being about numbers and percentages and figures, it became about names of individuals who lived in specific areas. It ended up being spread out across Greater Manchester. Andy Burnham appointed me as his public service reform champion chief exec. And we created integrated place-based teams across Greater Manchester, across the 10 council areas of Greater Manchester, covering all of the agencies that I've just mentioned. And we deployed risk stratification at scale and at pace across a number of different factors. So one of them was school readiness. Greater Manchester had one of the worst percentages of school readiness, of children starting reception ready, deemed as ready for school by DfE. And we were something like 40% of children were only 40% were ready for school. And it was worse in the poorest areas of Greater Manchester. So we decided to do something about that. We used all the data and intelligence in our systems, and we highlighted and targeted those children during the first few weeks of them being born with really intensive support, whether it was through a family nurse partnership, whether it was through support through the health visitor, through the midwifery team, to not just talk about the health of the child and the family and the mother, but to talk about the economic factors, to talk about substance abuse, to talk about skills and whether people could afford to bring up the child, parenting, attachment, all of the things that you would do in a Sure Start example, but without the additional money that Sure Start would bring. And we refocused our mainstream spend towards prevention. So in Wigan, after doing this for 10 years, so it's still going on today, even though I'm not there, it's a strategy that's about the place, not about the leader. Very often strategies change depending on political leadership, either nationally or locally, or managerial leadership. But this was about the people in the place. We had populations of between 30 to 50,000. All the international evidence says that that's the best footprint to work with. We had multidisciplinary teams, neighbourhood teams based in the neighbourhood, sat in the same office, sharing the oxygen, sharing all the data and intelligence, and then proactively coming up with a plan for people who were coming up on the risk stratification list, the top 1,000 people in each area who were at risk, for example, of entering into violence or becoming, a risk of we had things like unplanned hospital admission. We managed to reduce unplanned hospital admission by 30% amongst that targeted cohort of 4,000 people that we'd identified through our risk strat were at risk of an unplanned admission in Wigan. So that was a huge saving to the public sector. I think very often people think you need additional money to do all of this stuff, when I think it's actually about refocusing existing spend in a locality to get better value for that money. So we did some work intensively to get the deal started back in 2011, where we looked at where is our money going. And we took a group of 25 families whose children were on the edge of being taken into children's social care. And we broke down everything that we'd done as agencies, the police, social care, criminal justice, everything, over a 20-year period to support them. And we found we were spending on average per year, per family, around £500,000 a year, just on assessing them and referring them to different bits of the system. 80% of our time was on assessment and referral. Very often we would say, go away, you're not bad enough to access our services yet that we've designed for you without you. Go away, get worse. When you then meet our eligibility criteria for mental health or for domestic violence support or for eating disorders or for debt support, then we will allow you to access the very strict menu of things that we've designed for you without you. And that was the way that we were operating. That's why we had huge numbers of children not ready for school. We had huge and increasing numbers of children entering the social care system. And because we were going down a route of evicting people when they had not paid the rent, excuse me, even though 7 children might be going into care, we'd gone down the silo process of punitive public services, which is this deficit model of public service reform. So we completely subverted that. We decided to spend 80% of our time on actually helping people, using the data and insight that we had within our systems to support targeted people with preventative support, either through schools, through primary care, because schools and GPs are the most trusted unit of public service in a local neighbourhood. And then investing in the community and voluntary sector to create that capacity, that social infrastructure, that safety net that we've kind of lost a little bit over 40 odd years, 50 odd years of new public management, which is initiative after initiative. And when the money runs out, we leave the area. And that's just not good enough. We've got overlapping strategies, overlapping initiatives, all targeting the same people. That is such a waste of public money. So we've got to think differently. We've got to develop place leaders rather than service leaders. For me, it's place leadership where all of the national initiatives that come from the different government departments actually start to make sense. At the end of doing this relentlessly for 8 years, we'd managed to add, and this is why the King's Fund were really interested in it, and they've written a report on it if you're interested, called Lessons from the Wigan Deal, which kind of sets out everything that we did. But we managed to add an additional 7 years of healthy life expectancy in the most deprived wards for men and women. So that's the difference between becoming really ill and being on multiple medications at the age of 50, or the same happening to you at the age of 57. which is amazing for the person and obviously a lot cheaper and better and more effective outcome for all the public servants working together in the place. So for me, I think this work is brilliant. I really applaud the work of the Violence Reduction Unit and Xantura. I think it's really good. But for me, the big question is building the relationships of trust and confidence across system leaders, making it about place leadership, making that the default setting. We've developed something, David, myself and Andrew Laird, Chief Exec at Mutual Ventures, called Radical Place Leadership. There's loads of stuff you can read about that. There's loads of events that we've got. We've got one coming up in a couple of weeks with Rob Whiteman from the Chief Exec of SIPFA to talk about how the money links in with this. But it really is about putting the place first and starting with the person, not the service, not the initiative, and using that data and insight to best effect with early intervention and prevention and early help. It really does work. It takes a different type of leader to do it, a bit more courageous, a bit more thinking outside the box, and one who can build those relationships of trust and confidence. I always think, what's the worst that can happen with this approach? And I think the worst that can happen is we carry on trying to manage decline. Whatever government we have, by the end of this year or early next, it won't solve the problem of demand that we've got in our system. We need to shift away from this very silo-focused new public management model to one that starts with a person. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much, Donna. As ever, very straightforward, frank and honest views from you, and much appreciated. In terms of motivating local agencies to work together, to combine information, to combine the way they work, so that you're having a holistic assessment rather than assessment after assessment after assessment of needs. How do we go about motivating local agencies to do that when budgets are so tight, when leadership and management continues to be siloed? What are the practical things we can do to get local leaders engaged?
I think the first thing to do is to set out the kind of narrative, the compelling case for change, the business case for change. And for me, it starts with those 25 families, children on the edge of care. Look at where the money's going. Assessment referral, repeated assessment referral, passing people around. Usually they're presenting at A&E in mental health crisis or some other type of very expensive acute crisis point, because that's the only door that's open to them. So for me, it's about providing that as an evidence base to show the NHS in particular where the resource is going, to work in partnership with the people who really get it. And the people who do really get it is primary care physicians. They see it because they start with a person. In every interaction they have, they start with the person. And also schools. I think schools are one of the real kind of pivotal points within a community. They get it as well. Very often, I'm sure you've heard that every reception teacher can spot a child as he or she starts in reception in terms of the issues in the family. They can see whether that child is potentially destined for a life in prison, and that's the kind of, we need the data and insight, but we also need what people would describe as the soft intelligence, but I think it's the really vital intelligence of the local public servants who work in that place, who know those individuals and families who need that additional support. Very often it's generational. So for me, it's showing them where their money is going. I think it's also around having some kind of an agreement, which is around, look, we're going to act differently, we're going to think differently to deliver results that might not fall in our garden. The fruit might fall in somebody else's garden if we're to work differently. So for example, in Wigan, we tripled the size of our reablement team. That's the team that goes into a house and keeps people fit and well and out of hospital, puts in aids and adaptations and gives them that social connection that they might have missed, addresses social isolation and loneliness. But at the same time, that saved a huge amount of money, millions for the NHS. But we did it because it's the right thing to do for our people. So we forget organisation and think place. So
you were talking earlier about the fact that at the time there was a significant deficit in Wigan. So it's not as though you had the funding to invest in that enablement team. So how did you make the headroom in order to invest in those things that you felt would have the biggest impact?
Stop the multiple assessment and referral. That's where our resources are going. £500,000 a year per family per year. Multiply that by the population of children at risk of going into care. That was just one very tiny population with 25 families.
Yeah.
That's where local government's money is going. 65% of a council's budget is people services, children's and adult social care. And we've become incredibly risk averse. We're passing children around children's homes with bin bags with the belongings in to very expensively run private placements. Huge amount of money going into them. Councils saying they're only 2 or 3 children away from going into bankruptcy. So I think that whole model of care needs to be completely reimagined, preventative, focused on the person, and really focusing on where the money rests, where the cost rests, rather than, so often people say cut 10% of every budget. That's usually counterproductive because you cut your prevention services.
And that's where I suppose you need some bravery and courage within your leadership to stop doing certain things. As ineffective as they may have been, it's changing the status quo. There's always a concern that that's going to have a detrimental effect somewhere else along the line. But having the foresight to see that something isn't working and to change it.
I think the whole model is completely broken. I'll be honest, I sound like the Sultan of Doom, but I think unless we change, the biggest risk factor is not doing anything and just managing status quo. It will deliver, what you can see now. I remember we did the graph of doom, the local government association, the jaws of doom. It's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And most places have done nothing about it.
Yeah. So the jaws of doom, that must be going back to 2010-11, where we're forecasting, I think then forecasting that by 2015-16, all that local authorities would be able to afford would be those children's social care and adult social care services that were dealing with the most acute need. We're certainly there, or got close to it now. If you do have questions for Donna, please, got a few minutes to get final questions in. One here regarding police and local government working together. In your experience, can they work together well on initiatives such as tackling serious violence? What are your thoughts on that?
I think absolutely. I think the police are the most place-based partner that I've ever worked with. I think they get it because they're policing divisions and units within a very specific locality. They know the area intimately. And within each of the 7 place-based teams we had a police officer who would be working for the place, obviously not diluting their professionalism, but taking it to that locality, working on prevention strategies, and working with their colleagues on things like violence reduction, substance abuse, all sorts of things that were going on in those localities. They were the most passionate advocates of place-based working in my experience. Those head teachers and physicians, primary care physicians. We had a really amazing community safety team, brilliant, doing some really proactive risk stratification work around a number of different factors, but always pinning it back down to that person, that household, rather than the service or the initiative, right down to the household.
Mark, would you like to come in?
Yes, I think just to add to that, because I am employed by Kent County Council, and so in this role, I've never worked as closely with the police as I have right now. I think Donna's absolutely nailed it in terms of the police. They are that place-based service, and I think we have seen, and there's a number of kind of strategies out there. Certainly, that sort of child-centered policing is very much about prevention, and I think when you can kind of engage those leaders and you can help them see how you can help prevent things from occurring, and you get that support, you will absolutely get that collaboration. I think there's a challenge about sustaining that leadership, certainly because people move roles, so you need to have that shared vision and you hold on to that vision. But I think we see some very good examples of the police and the local authority collaborating together. But it's one of those things, you can't just do it once and then assume it's all going to be rosy. You have to keep working at that relationship, working at that collaboration, and celebrating that success. I think if you can have that joint celebration of success, then you've got a really strong partnership that can build and grow.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I think you've sort of answered the final question that I had here, which was around what can local authorities do to work better with police, and vice versa, what can police do better to work with local government? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Donna.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going into a risk stratification meeting, and it was initially between the police and council officers. And it was funny because they weren't in uniform. I walked in, you couldn't tell who worked for which agency, because they were all looking at the data and focusing on the people and the communities rather than their own organisation. And I think that's the beauty of this work. We don't think organisation first, we go right back to communities. And we're all, we ended up with huge amounts of success for both. So, and the politicians loved it. The police, everyone, it was just a success for everyone. And we saved the money because we stopped doing the things that didn't work and invested that money into the things that did work.
Right, so thanks, Donna. Mark, did you want to come back in?
No, I think Donna has probably made the points I was going to make. So no, nothing else to add. Thanks.
Right. Thank you all. So that pretty much concludes today's webinar, and our thanks again to Donna and to Mark, Tom, Hannah for their presentations today. Really appreciate it. We hope you found the discussions interesting and helpful. There'll be a recording of today's website available on our webinar on our website in coming days. So please do pass that on to those colleagues who might have missed today and you think might be interested. If you're interested in knowing more about the support that Mutual Ventures or Zentura can provide, please do get in touch with us. You'll find our contact details on our respective websites. And finally, it just remains for me to thank you for attending today's discussion. I really appreciate you doing that. And once again, thanks to our presenters for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.